one more. This one is called Ferncliff Illusion. It's also really beautiful. Look at that. It's like a white with a little bit of lavender purple on the tips. We're heading into the end of September and it's officially fall, but it sure doesn't look like it because the blooms keep coming. Hi, it's Steph. And if you're new to my channel, each month I like to go through and do a garden tour and see what things look like at that point in the garden season. And I garden and live in Massachusetts, which is a zone 6. So we will start here today in my front walkway, which is one of my main borders, with some dahlias. A friend had shared with me some extra dahlia tubers, and these happen to be a short-statured dahlia. I believe it's called Blizzard, and it is a really pretty white dahlia. And because they are fairly short, they don't require a lot of staking. I did go ahead and put a floral ring around them because we did get a lot of rain recently, which did cause them to sort of flop a tiny bit. But in general, the shorter dahlias are pretty sturdy. And something that has also turned out a lot better than I expected is my gomphrena. If you were around last year, I had grown a purple gomphrena that I had bought the seeds from Baker Creek. It was called Atomic Purple. And I decided that although I loved the purple, I wanted to try a different color this year. So I went ahead and I ordered the Snow White gomphrena, also from Baker Creek. And last month when I did my garden tour in August, it was just starting to pick up on blooms and I still wasn't quite sure how I felt about it. Now, I will say that I still do prefer the Atomic Purple, but the white is growing on me. As it's getting fuller and more blooms, it's creating more of an impact. So now the white blooms are a bit more visible as I pull down the driveway. Initially, I didn't think I was going to like the white because it was kind of faint and there weren't a lot of blooms, so it kind of just faded into the background. But I will say that I do like it slightly better now that it is fuller with more blooms. However, next year I will go back to growing a brighter color. I just feel like it pops a little bit better in the front of this border. Something else that looks really beautiful is this here. It's a spirea called Candy Corn. It's by Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs, and it is a dwarf spirea. It gets this beautiful color variation, and you can see that we are now at the end of September, and look at all this beautiful color on the new growth. Some red and this orangey color and the chartreuse. It is just a stunning shrub. And in early summer, it will get clusters of hot pink blooms, like a fuchsia color. Absolutely gorgeous. My roses are also doing really well. These are the double pink knockout roses, and you can see on these two shrubs, especially that one there, that there is a bunch of new growth. All of this red foliage is new growth, and it's still pushing out blooms. And tons of buds. You can see at the top there are a bunch of buds. So these will bloom for you from about late May all the way through October when we get our first frost. This year we're due to get our first frost somewhere around the first week of October. We're gonna head down the walkway now, and this week actually I ended up trimming up some of my shrubs. This here is a boulevard cypress, and it's a topiary form, and it had gotten pretty shaggy, and it actually had a bunch of growth that was going kind of wild on top. It looked like it had a little bit of a mohawk, so I did go through and trim it just a little bit. But the thing with trimming shrubs at this time of year is you don't want to trim them too aggressively, because if you get a sudden frost, you can get a little bit of browning. So it's just as important to make sure that you don't trim your shrubs when it is too hot and they can burn, or when it is going to get too cold where they can again get some winter burn. So I didn't trim it too aggressively. I just shaped it a tiny bit and it looks much better. And I actually did the same thing to another shrub down the walkway here. I had in a previous video shown how I turned a gold mop cypress into a topiary. And this is it right here. The reason I did that was because this gold mop cypress had gotten really large. Now these are beautiful shrubs. They offer a lot of evergreen interest with this golden foliage. And it had really started to overgrow my walkway. It had been planted here for about 10 years since we started our landscape, and I wanted to keep this beautiful shrub here because I love the color of this yellow foliage against my green Hinoki cypress. This grouping here provides so much winter interest. I just love it. So what I decided to do was, one day George and I sat on the floor here, and it took us a couple of hours, but we started to kind of go through the shrub and clean it out. And we went limb by limb, and we sort of selected which ones we wanted to keep as trunks. And we cleaned up all of the foliage and limbed it up so that now it looks like a funky little tree. And I just love it. I call it my gold Mop Cypress topiary. So if you have one that's outgrowing its space, give this a shot. It's a fun project to try, and it can keep the shrub in its space a lot longer. Now I have a lot more growing space in front of it. I recently planted this Carly Rose fountain grass, this pennisetum here, and I'm thinking I'm really going to love this beautiful pink plume this time of year in this corner. I think it gives a nice textural difference in the grass with the evergreens. The textures play off of each other and the colors, so I think it looks really pretty. And over in this bed here, my zinnias are still looking really beautiful. This is a new variety of zinnia to me that I tried for the first time this year, and it is the Zahara Double Raspberry Ripple. And what's really beautiful about these is that they are a dwarf zinnia, so they're pretty short, which makes them wonderful for the front of the border. They have this striping effect too. They start off a really pretty fuchsia, and as they age, they almost take on different shades of pink, and they look striped. I came in here and maybe deadheaded this once, only a couple of weeks ago, for the first time all season, and now you can see that they're still going, and my expectation is that they will probably bloom until the first frost. So this is one that I plan on repeating again. I bought these seeds off of a seller on Etsy, but they are also available on Park Seed if you wanted to try them next season. And I have some purple ageratum, which took a little bit to get going. A friend had shared these seedlings with me, but they have the most beautiful violet color, like a lilac. Gorgeous. And they look really whimsical, kind of just popping up between my bobo hydrangeas and the zinnias in the front of the border here. We still have some anemones that are blooming from when I planted these in a video a couple of videos back. I have a group here and another one on the other side of my blue spruce that you can see keeps putting out more and more buds. Tons of buds on it. So it looks like it's really enjoying this spot, which is good. And I decided to grow some cosmos this year in my bed, and actually it's filling in a nice gap back there because I had some daisies there. And once the daisies were done, the white cosmos here are sort of filling in that gap and providing that same look. And because these are annuals, they will bloom all season until we get a hard frost. I just deadheaded those this week too, which deadheading just means cutting away the spent blooms, and that will clean up the plant and will keep it producing more blooms. As you can see, I recently picked up some pumpkins to decorate with. We have a local farm stand down the street, and yeah, some really great pumpkins. So I'll be putting those out on my porch any day now. And a quick update on this area here behind our driveway walls. If you recall a few videos back, we had removed some Limelight Prime standards that we had here, some hydrangea trees. It just turned out to be the wrong plant for the wrong spot. They've gone to a new home, and now we're working on putting something else here. And initially I thought that I would plant a Limelight Prime or a Pinky Winky hydrangea, and I had asked you on your thoughts on those. And while I do still plan on planting a Pinky Winky somewhere in my garden, I have rethought this plan, and I now have another idea for this area. I have something in the works, and if everything pans out, I'll be sure to let you know in a few weeks, but I'll keep you updated either way. Some plants that I have planted here in front of the walls, I actually planted from seed some Sonata white cosmos. They are a great height because they only get to be about 2 feet tall. and they're still doing really well. I have about 3 on each side, not too many, but they are still blooming and have tons of buds. And the Armeria, or the Drift of Thrift that we planted in the spring, is also still putting out blooms. You can see there's still a few more coming here. And they're doing fairly well. This one has some blooms, that one doesn't, but that one also does. And here is my Heritage River Birch. We planted this a year ago this spring, and it is looking beautiful. It has put on some growth because it does look taller than it did when we planted it, and the bark looks absolutely stunning at the moment. It's really peely, and this is a great feature of this plant, or this tree I should say, is that it has really beautiful winter interest with the peeling bark. And next we'll head over to our patio bed is what I like to call it, because it is right over by our patio. So here in this bed, I recently did make some changes as well. We planted some more late season perennials just a few videos back, but I wanted to show you a shrub that looks absolutely beautiful right now. And it is quickly making the list of one of my favorites. Besides that candy corn spirea that we saw in the front, this is another shrub that is offering some really beautiful fall interest. You can see here on this new growth, or on this top growth, how it's changing to shades of red around the margins of this plant. It has green in the center with yellow, like a creamy color around the edges. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a variegated shrub. This will bloom with little purple blooms in the spring, and it is loaded with blooms, and at the beginning the foliage is pretty small, but as the blooms go away, the foliage gets larger and more variegated and more bright as the season progresses. So this is the Monet Purple Effect Weigela. Really beautiful. It's also dwarf, so it's a more compact Weigela, and the size on this one is about 24 to 30 inches tall and wide. I recently cut back all of my alliums, so I had a group of 3 Millennium alliums here, also a wonderful late season color perennial. But I did go ahead and cut them because they have a tendency to self-seed a little bit. And I talked about that in my last video, so you can see that those have been cut back. And something else I wanted to bring attention to is these beautiful grass-like perennials that I have in the front here. Now these aren't officially called a grass, but they are a type of grass-like perennial. And this is called Ogon Acora Sweet Flag. And it is a variegated sweet flag. And this Acora is a wonderful plant for this bed. This area here stays a little bit moist, and these do wonderful in a wet soil condition. They can be grown in some ponds by water. They're great. And what I love about them is that they are evergreen. So they get a bit brighter yellow with the cooler temperatures. So in the spring and in the fall, they have the brightest coloring. Then they get a little bit paler as we go through the winter, but they stay alive. So they are evergreen here in my zone 6, which is great. So when everything else in this bed is asleep for the winter, the Acora Sweet Flag in the front looks wonderful, and so do the couple of evergreens that I have in this bed. So it's a great way to keep winter interest when everything else is dormant. And anemones. Now I know some people will think that I say that incorrectly, but it's the way I say it and it works for me, so we'll go with it. But I planted these here just recently and they are gorgeous. Look at all of these buds. This just happened in recent weeks, but there's one right here that you can see. It's a really frilly kind of bloom. But this plant is amazing me because it has so many buds for a new perennial that I recently planted. So this should continue to bloom for me for a couple more weeks at this point, which is really exciting because that was my goal when I added these perennials. I added these anemones. I also added some eupatorium or Joe Pieweed. So I have a variety called Little Joe here. And as the season progresses and it gets a bit cooler, it's getting a bit darker, which is really lovely. Here's another one of those anemones. They're called, this one here is called Whirlwind. So I have the Honorine Jobert in the front border, and I planted this Whirlwind variety here, and this one's like a double rough leaf variety. My zinnias are still going. I have a group there and I have another group here. I planted a couple of different varieties. I have the Queen Lime Orange. This white one is called Polar Bear, but the Queen Lime Orange are just stunning. And here is another Joe Pye weed. So I'm gonna go around to show that to you. So this Joe Pye weed is called Eupatorium rugosa chocolate. And what's interesting about this variety is that it had darker foliage, and you can still see that it has fairly dark stems. And the foliage has now greened up a bit just as the blooms are starting to open. So this is a later blooming Joe Pye weed, and it is really pretty. So it still has a bunch of clusters, and these are all going to open up soon. So this is going to be a puff of white any day now, and I'm really looking forward to it. And the last thing I want to show you in this bed is over to this side. So George is going to come around and I'm going to show you my Shalom. So here on the side of my other gold mop cypress and beneath my garnet Japanese maple, I've planted this Shalom. And the Japanese maple is offering it just enough shade to keep it happy, because Shalom, or turtlehead, is a plant that prefers part shade. And it also likes moist soil, so this bed was a perfect spot to plant it. Now, I have had this planted here for about a month now, and it is still blooming. So it looks like this plant will bloom for quite a good amount of time, 3 to 4 weeks at least at this point. And it's looking healthy and happy in this spot, so I'm really happy to have added it this year. And now we'll move on to my shed beds. One last thing in this bed before we move over to the shed beds. This here is looking beautiful. This is an agastache that I started from seed. It's called Golden Hyssop Jubilee, and it is gorgeous. It's got this chartreuse foliage and these purple blooms, and it has just started to pick up. I'm not certain, even though this was labeled as a perennial, I'm not certain that it'll make it over the winter here in this bed, because it does stay a little bit moist, but time will tell. But it did grow really well using the winter sowing method. As we go here to my left side shed bed, my magnolia, this is a Dr. Merrill magnolia. It's my favorite tree in my garden at the moment, and it has beautiful white flowers in the spring. And now I can see that it has some berries on it, which is kind of interesting. This is a new discovery for me. This has never happened to this tree before. So if you grow this variety of magnolia, do yours produce berries like this? Let me know in the comments. And just underneath the magnolia, I recently planted something. I planted a Hakonakloa, Japanese forest grass, all gold. And I thought that this all gold here would look really pretty to offer a pop of yellow in this bed. Now, as this grows, it'll drape over this corner, and I think it'll look really pretty. And the magnolia should offer it just enough shade to keep it happy in this spot, because these grasses do prefer a bit more shade. And of course, I cannot go by this bed without talking about this beautiful hydrangea. This is the traditional quick fire hydrangea by Proven Winners. It is an absolute beauty. It starts off with some creamy white blooms in June, and then July. I want to say in July it was in full bloom. And then look at the color on this as we head into the fall. Is that not beautiful? It's like a deep pink and mauve. It's stunning. And this hydrangea has sort of an open panicle, so it's very airy in the way that it carries its blooms. I have to say that between this and my little limes, it's really hard to choose the favorite. And something that popped up unexpectedly in this bed this year was some Verbena bonariensis. You can see them kind of floating above the bed here. They're just so whimsical and really pretty. And here is my hibiscus that finished blooming just a couple of weeks ago, but this dark foliage is still looking really beautiful. This is the Proven Winners Perfect Storm Hardy Hibiscus. It has really large, light pink blooms with a red eye, but even when it's not in bloom, just this foliage makes it a really beautiful plant. And my containers. So this year I used Mandevilla back here. Do you do that when you walk by your plants? You just have to deadhead them? I do this constantly. But I did use Mandevilla in my containers, and in this back area I used white because I thought that it coordinated nicely with my shed. Well, just as we get to the end of the season, they're looking absolutely beautiful. They've filled out this container so beautifully. The cordyline in the center also looks really pretty and has filled out. So I'm just really loving this combination this year. I may try to overwinter them. I have tried in the past, and I feel like they take a really long time to get going in the spring, but we'll see. Maybe I'll try it again this year. And my hedge of little lime hydrangeas. I absolutely love these hydrangeas. The color that they get this time of year is unmatched. They have these gorgeous shades of green and pink and mauve, and they will continue to change over the next month. But they are absolutely one of my favorite things to look at out my window. When I'm doing dishes in my kitchen, this is the view that I have, and I really love the addition of this little hedge here. I have 3 little lime hydrangeas planted here, and they have been here for this is its 3rd season, and they've really filled out this area. And as we move past the hedge of the little lime hydrangeas, we are now in my new garden area called my Japanese maple garden. I have some Japanese maples as well as some conifers in here. And this area should really come into its own in the next month in terms of fall color. These trees will start to transition to beautiful shades of red and orange, and I'm really excited to see how that looks this year now that we've completed our path, and the garden is starting to look a little more finished. So we will be sure to do a full tour in this area when we get to the October garden tour in just a few weeks. But I'm really loving this garden, and I'm happy that it's something that George and I were able to work on together. He is not a gardener, even though he does help me quite a bit out here. Gardening is not his passion, it's mine. But I'm grateful that we found a common interest in Japanese maples. But I will tell you one thing about this garden right now that is looking really beautiful. And, well, everything looks really beautiful to me, but something that is doing exceptionally well, and I'm really hopeful to keep it alive over the winter, is this Chinese fringe flower that my friend Janie over at Dig Plant Water Repeat sent me. We did a plant swap a few months back. I sent her a Japanese maple, and she sent me this shrub. And it has really pretty red, really dark foliage. It is a little bit hard to see against my black mulch, but this is rated for a zone 7 and I am in a zone 6. So I am going to try to mulch it with some leaves, maybe protect it somehow in hopes that it overwinters for me and comes back next season because I really enjoy it so far. All right. I am going to show you a couple more things, and I thought that because it's September and the dahlias have really picked up, let's go take a look at a couple of dahlias. And before we get to the dahlias, I just wanted to make a quick stop to show you something in this area. Around this tree, we made kind of a woodland bed, like a tree ring, and I have like a rhododendron, a lilac, and a few other things planted. But among these plants, I had purchased this start of monkshood. Now, monkshood, it is a toxic plant, so if you have children or pets, something you want to be careful about planting. But this, I planted here a couple of years ago, and it is just now getting to the point where it might bloom for me. These look like bloom buds, but we'll have to wait and see what it looks like in a couple of weeks. If it does bloom, I will take a photo of it and I will post it on the community page on my channel. But it's really exciting because when you've planted a plant for 2 or 3 years and you've never seen it bloom, you're pretty excited when the time comes where it might possibly bloom. So that's where I'm at. I'm at Bloom Watch with the monkshood. If you grow that in your garden, let me know. Do you like it? Is it a good plant for you? I'm curious. Okay, on to the dahlias. Ooh, I scared him. Maverick. This is our neighborhood cat. His name is Maverick, and he hangs out in the whole neighborhood, and he keeps the mice away. He does like to occasionally drop one off at your doorstep though, so you got to be careful about that. But he's a real good boy. Likes to come visit me when I'm gardening. Okay, so here we are in the vegetable garden, and this is also a place where I grow vegetables. I grow some annuals like my dahlias, but I also overwinter plants in here. So I still have these beautiful sedums. These are Autumn Joy sedum that I had purchased last year on clearance at the Home Depot, end of season, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them yet, but they're absolutely beautiful. So I will find a home for them in the garden. Everything is looking a bit worse for the wear at this point because it's the end of the season. I grew cherry tomatoes up my trellises. I actually have quite a group of tomatoes to pick right here at the moment that I just noticed when I came in here. And we are getting rain, so I will have to pick all of these. But you can see here, I have quite a few. And they're looking really lovely. I'm gonna give them a couple more days. And if you're wondering how my trellis did to hold up my dahlias, it's looking like it's putting a little bit of weight on here. It's kind of what your pants feel like on Thanksgiving, but they definitely are holding the dahlias to some extent. At least that's what my pants feel like on Thanksgiving. Do your pants feel like that? Gotta wear stretchy ones. But there are some really beautiful dahlias. This one here is called Daisy Duke. And it's a really pretty small ball dahlia. I do struggle with earwigs. I get tons of earwigs in this garden, and I haven't quite decided or figured out how to deal with them. For the most part, most of the blooms are fine, but once in a while I will get a couple that are pretty chewed up by the earwigs. So this one here is called Marn. It's a really beautiful small stature bald dahlia. I do have to come here and deadhead, but there are a ton of buds. It's a little tight in this area, so let's see. So this beauty here is called Alamode. It's a really pretty creamy colored one with some peach in the center. There's another one here. You can see this one did get pretty chewed up by earwigs. And I have the famous Cafe Olay, and this one is the most sought after variety of dahlia, especially for people who do floral arrangements. They use these for weddings and such. It's a real beauty. You can see I have to deadhead these, but there's another one coming in here. Some of them have a little bit more pink to them. You can see when they start to open up, they have a little hue of pink, but then they get really creamy. This beauty here is called Thomas Edison, and it's got a really gorgeous purple bloom. And you can see that some staking works really well, but this one here, the plant got so large that some of it is staked and then some of it ended up just kind of hanging over. And that happens. With your best intentions on staking dahlias, it's not foolproof. Inevitably, depending on the weather, we've been getting a ton of rain, which is great, but the bad side of that is that it does put a lot of pressure on plants and will cause them to flop a bit more than they would if you didn't get a lot of rain or heavy rain. Couple more dahlias right here. Now this one I've grown before. It's called Cream de Cassis, and what's really beautiful about this one is that you can see that the back side of the bloom has this really deep color. It's almost like a maroon, and then if you look at the front of it, it has this really gorgeous light pink, so it's like two-toned. And as time goes on, this is probably my 4th year growing dahlias, I'm appreciating these smaller dahlias much more. Because although the dinner plates are absolutely stunning, it just takes one dinner plate to fill a bud vase. And it's kind of hard to arrange with them because when you put them in a vase, they sort of take up the whole space. But talking about dinner plates, this one is a dinner plate size. These blooms just happen to be a little smaller. Look at this beauty. These are stunning. A friend gave this tuber to me, and these are not colors that I would normally grow, yellows and reds, but this one is awesome. This is called Ketchup and Mustard, and I'm guessing you can tell why, right? The color, but it's a real beauty. This one's just opening up. It's nice and vibrant. So real pretty. So we'll go ahead and take a look at a couple more dahlia varieties that are outside the fence there. But check out this. I grew some delicata squash. It's one of the favorites for us in my household. This is probably the only squash that I can get my family to eat because when you roast it, it's nice and sweet. And you can also eat the skin, which is great. So I've grown this for a couple of years and I really like it. The leaves did go over. They got powdery mildew, so I did peel them all off, but I did leave them on the vine so that they can ripen a little bit longer. And I grew a really interesting variety of cucumber this year. It is not like your traditional cucumber. This one is actually called Silver Slicer, and it is a white cucumber. And it's actually pretty tasty. It doesn't have a ton of seeds. It has some in the center, but I find it to have a little bit less than some of the green varieties like the Market More that I've grown in the past. Okay, off to the dahlias. Okay, and a couple more beauties on this side. So this one here is called Lavender Perfection. It's a real pretty one. It's more pink than it is lavender, but it's still really beautiful. This one here, a friend shared with me recently, and it is called Gets Crazy, and it has a beautiful pink with yellow in the middle of the center of the petal. So it's a real pretty one. And this beauty here is called Belle of Barmera. It almost looks like the Penn Hill watermelon, but it's a bit more peachy in tone. I have that one and this beauty right here. Woo! Do you see that? An earwig just fell out. Ah! See? That's what I'm dealing with out here. Lots of creepy crawlers. All right, so now we are going to continue the garden tour and wrap up in the front of the house. One more. This one is called Ferncliff Illusion. It's also really beautiful. Look at that. It's like a white with a little bit of lavender purple on the tips. And as we head up to the front border, we're walking by this area where I have some foundation plantings, and I have this all gold juniper here, which is really beautiful. But what I want to show you is this other shrub that also has some really nice fall interest. And this is the Proven Winners Pearl Glam Beauty Berry. It is absolutely beautiful. Has this dark foliage, and it's just starting to get its little white blooms. You can see some of them have started to open here. And following these little white blooms are going to be the most beautiful purple pink berries. So this is a really beautiful shrub. It stays pretty compact. I would say it's medium sized. It's vase shaped, so it grows a little bit taller than it does wide. It gets to be about 4 to 5 feet wide and about 3 to 4 feet. No, I want to say it gets to be about 4 feet wide and maybe 5 or 6 feet tall. So pretty good size, vase shaped, and it's probably going to get moved because this is going to get so big that it's going to block it. So I might put this in another spot next season, but this is a really pretty shrub for some fall interest. And my Fire Glow Japanese maple is getting, it's going to get a bit more fiery as we get into the fall. It'll get brighter red. And coming around here, this is the bed that I recently did some work on. We had dug up all of the daylilies that were in this bed, and I added some more late season interest plants. In a recent video where I added some fall interest plants to the garden, I planted this agastache here. This is the Blue Fortune agastache, and it is still going. And again, the bees love this. Tons of pollinators all over it all the time. That little cute hanoki there is called Nana Lutea, and it is a dwarf hanoki cypress. It has not grown that much, which is great, so it stays pretty small and compact, but it has a really beautiful eye-catching yellow color. And if you recall, several months back, some point in the spring, I had divided and transplanted sedum. Well, here it is. I do have to edge this bed. You can see that it's a bit overgrown. So it's something that we'll tackle at some point before next season. And I'm just really loving the look of this sedum. Now this is a variety that, it's a type of autumn joy sedum. It might be the neon variety. My neighbor had given me this division when I started working on my gardens. And from that small plant that she gave me, I now have a group of 5 across this bed. Here is the little bunny dwarf fountain grass that we divided a couple of videos back. It also looks like it's doing well. And I think it's going to be a really nice addition between this sedum for that late season, early fall interest. And another candy corn spirea. I absolutely love this shrub. And I just noticed that I have a snapdragon bloom. Now snapdragons like cool weather. I did sow these via the winter sowing method. I planted them out kind of late and they didn't bloom in the summer, but I was hoping that once they got cooler in the fall that they would bloom, and that is my first bloom. The variety is called Lucky Lips, I believe. It's like a bicolored rosy pink and white. The fashionably early crystal phlox just finished blooming with its second flush of blooms. And I have another Blue Fortune agastache planted here. And as we head towards the front porch, I have some more containers of Mandevilla. In the front, I decided to do pink so that it would be more visible from the street. And you can see that they're still blooming as we get into the end of September. I will keep these going as long as possible. I recently picked up some celosia that I will be planting here to add a little bit of fall color with this red. But all in all, I was really happy with these containers this summer. The lantana is looking absolutely beautiful. It keeps blooming and pushing out new buds. And now we are back where we started, in the front walkway. So I hope that you've enjoyed taking a walk around the garden with me this evening. It's always nice to see what's blooming at what time of year. It's a good way to observe where you might have some gaps in the garden and what you might want to change. The weather is also perfect to start doing some of that change that you want to do in the garden, transplanting, dividing, so that the garden is ready to go next spring. So thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button, and please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos. And we'll see you soon.